Hey, book lovers. Welcome back to Seriously Sandra, where we get real about books and the brilliant minds behind them. Today, I am so beyond excited to have in front of me Sheila Williams. Oh my gosh, you just don't know. We're going to dive into stories, plots, and all the writing. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's chat books. Welcome, Sheila.
You.
I am fine, thank you. Oh my gosh, I love you so much.
Oh, thank you.
You have one of my all-time favorite books in the world that you wrote, what I should say, and that is Dancing on the Edge of the Roof.
Oh,
And I read that in the 90s when it came out in 2000 or in late
it
90s.
came out in 2002. Yes.
2002, right? When it
Yeah.
came out, I couldn't remember when it came out.
Yes.
And when it came out, that book spoke to me in such a way. And for those who don't know, it is the story of a woman who changes her life through the written word and through books.
Yes.
And you had me at hello because she used romance books in it. And I grew up on the romance, which is a whole other thing.
So
Harlequin and
that's
Mills and
right.
Boone,
That's
right?
right.
And so I grew up on that. And I fell in love with one of the sentences you wrote in there was that she had to use the dictionary
Yes.
to look up books,
Yes.
to look up words rather,
Words. Yes.
right? And and as I thought about it, I remember the first time and every time I've read it since, I love my romance authors, romance writers. The words aren't normally that difficult,
No.
but she found that in there. And
Yes.
then the other thing that just struck me is when she does change her life, and one of the sentences was, I used to say, I said, now I say, I recall. So I just love to hear more like your whole is for. Anyway, I'm shutting up. People want to hear from you.
Well, Dancing on the Edge of the Roof is in its own way. It will always be my favorite book because it's my first published book. And I didn't think little girls from the east side of Columbus, Ohio could write books and get them published. I grew up, taking books home from the library. I grew up reading everything I could get my hands on, including and especially romance novels, which of course feature women in the center of the story. And I didn't recognize what was going on in my head with that, but having, being a young woman and having a woman in the center of a story, there was something going on there. My brain picked up on it. I didn't consciously do it. But at some point I recognized that, a little girl like me should be allowed to have an adventure. There's always this great journey, and in Homer's Odyssey, he takes this great journey, and so and so takes a great journey. It's always a man. And I thought, well, why can't it be somebody like me,
Mhm.
who takes a journey and has an adventure? And of course, a woman from the inner city, um, who's working very hard to keep herself and her family afloat, who's a little bit put upon, or a lot put upon, you might say, dares to dream that maybe
Mhm.
she could have an adventure. I thought, how dare she do that? I'm going to take her on an adventure. And that was, you start with books, you start with stories. And I thought, yes, she needs to be the heroine of her own story. And what better person to do it than my Juanita? I mean, that was my character. That was me. And I took her and myself on an adventure. And let me tell you, Sandra, that book took me a lot of places I never thought I would go.
Tell me more. Oh, we want to know where'd you go?
Well, I mean, it both inside and out.
Hmm.
You write a book, and you write lots of books sometimes, but this is the one that found an editor's heart, and that's what takes you on that publishing journey. And then you get to the point where it's going to be a reality, and someone tells you, introverted me, oh, by the way, you're going to have to do book signings and actually talk to people about it. And I thought, oh my God. I just put it out on the, nope, you have to be you're the face of the book. So I had to learn to be comfortable in front of people at a bookstore, or, Sandra Elaine Scott. I had to learn to do that. That was a journey. I had to learn to talk to people who might want to put it on film, which is what happened eventually. And that was another journey. I never thought I would see anything that I had written become the foundation for a film, but this book did. And I learned from that experience what it is that producers and directors, and most especially the talent, as in this case Alfre Woodard, what they saw in my words that inspired them, and that was a revelation to me as well. So I went on that journey. I was on location for part of the filming. I got to meet some really cool people.
Who'd you meet? I mean, I just think that is fabulous. And for those who don't know, the movie Juanita, and is it still on Netflix?
I think it's still on Netflix. Yes.
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 And that is based off this book, Dancing on the Edge of the Roof. And I was going to ask you about that. So tell me, like, how cool was that? I mean, when they called and said, okay, they want to turn this into a movie, what went through your mind?
Well, the first thing you learn when you write a book is, and they tell you this, so that you don't get your hopes up, 90% of all books do not get optioned. And when they do get optioned, they aren't made. They don't make it to film. Things happen. And my book was optioned early on, but, things happened and it did not come to film. But I enjoyed the experience of talking with the people in that industry. Eventually, the option, as they call it, lapsed. And I thought, well, it's been a good ride. It's been a lot of fun. Maybe the next book I write will become, that was my thought process. Then I got a phone call from Alfre Woodard, who said, I see that the option's about to lapse. I'm going to pick it up because I want to make this piece. And so she picked up the option. If you look at the credits on Juanita, you will see that she's listed as executive producer. It took some time. It took gathering pennies and breaking piggy banks and all of that stuff, but the movie did come, to the screen. I got to meet Blair Underwood, participated. Wow. Now, he's a character I didn't write, but I'm not going to complain about that. I got to meet Clark Johnson, who was the amazing director. I got to meet so many interesting people. LaTanya Jackson, incredible woman, incredible actress. The whole cast was just amazing. The crew was amazing. We had it, people talk about, the DEI situation is very much in our faces these days. Our cast and crew was totally multi-ethnic.
That's awesome.
And women participated. They were picking up these heavy cables and the cameras, and we had a workplace that was, there were women, there were men, everybody. It was like a party. You've invited everyone, and they were all there. And that was wonderful for me as well, to see that, because that's what I had written in the book. We had a third of our cast, I think, was First Nation. We're at First Nation and Indigenous people. And that was important because that, Jess is my main character. Yes. And I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And it gave me perspective on how to use the written word. When you write for a novel, you're not collaborating. You can micromanage every detail. On the film, when you write the script, and I did not write the script, but what I learned was, of course, you have to be prepared to leave a lot of white space so that the director, the producer, the set designer, the lighting people, the DP, everybody can put their stamp on it, and the actors, because they take those words and interpret them. And you can't micromanage that. I mean, unless you're the producer and the director and the money person. but I was not. So it was my opportunity to learn how that process works. And I can go on, and I don't want to take up all your time, but
No, no, no.
it was
I mean,
fascinating.
it's absolutely fascinating. So thank you, because for those who are watching and want and who are authors and are aspiring writers and think one day that it's going to be on film, that's something for us all to know. That what happens and what you think is going to happen or what you see in the movies, because I often joke about in the movies the writer's life is either so magnificent and glorious and so extra, or it's the impoverished, you're on the streets. So it's like,
You don't think you recognize, and I used to go back and forth. The script writer was Roderick Spencer, and Roderick and I were both on set in location in Virginia where they did some filming, and we would tease each other. We would often sit side by side, and if something got cut, then I would say, "Well, that's because you wrote it," and if something got cut, he would say, "Well, that's because you had it in the book," and so we just had a great time because you learn that, of course, it comes down to, sometimes it comes down to money. If we shoot this scene, it's going to cost X and we'll go over budget. Or we need this particular actor and they have to leave on Wednesday and we can't shoot it until Friday. So we got to, there's a lot that's going on that when you're writing this book, you don't think, that's not in your head. So I enjoyed it because it was a great learning experience and I got to meet some really cool people. So
that is awesome. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I mean, you're just such a prolific writer, but your newest work, or the one that I also wanted to talk to you about, is No Better Time. And I thought it was really interesting that the movie 6888,
yeah,
that out of Tyler Perry Studios, that he did, that was on Netflix, really brought to light the women of the 6888. And I had read your book, and I read your book and Sisters in Arms, also by Kaya Alderson.
yeah.
And those are two that, as one of the things that I love as for historical fiction is that, I've joked about I'm done with World War II. Like, I've just had it, except for World War II that features the stories of people of color and our stories.
Yes.
And so it was amazing with, the movie coming out, that your book, Sisters in Arms, those books are getting highlighted again. So I know you have a personal connection to that. So I would love for you to share with everyone.
Well, I do have a personal connection. Dorothy Turner Johnson was my mother's first cousin. Her mother and my grandmother were sisters. And Dorothy, of course, was one of the older cousins. So she was one of the older glamorous cousins. And my mother and aunts just idolized, the Turner girls. And Dorothy was just so popular. She was one of those dynamic people. And when she would come to visit, it was a big deal. She retired. She worked in Cleveland for many years as a librarian and as a scholar. She was a Guggenheim scholar. And she, excuse me, Fulbright, not Guggenheim, Fulbright. And when she retired to Florida, but once a year or so, she would come to Columbus and visit all the relatives who lived still in Ohio. And that would include my mother and my aunts. And she was one of those people, Sandra, that sparkled. And she always had an interesting story to tell because she had always done something interesting. She'd either gotten back from someplace amazing or was headed out to someplace amazing. She had a master's degree, 2 bachelor's degrees, I think. She had written a book, which was translated into Spanish. In fact, it was written in Spanish and translated into English. She spoke some Japanese. I mean, this woman was phenomenal. And I remember vividly sitting in my mom's living room because I'm a family history geek as well, as you know. And I was getting the Montgomery side, my mother's family side of the history together. And Dorothy started talking about things that she had done. And as she breezed along that highway, she dropped in this comment about, oh, and I drove a truck in France when I was in the Army, and then I went to Japan and I did this and I did that. And I said, well, what was, go back a couple things. What was that about a truck in the Army? And she said, well, I was in the Army. Oh, I told you that. I said, no, you never, no, I don't remember hearing that. And so I had to pull her into a space where she would talk about it. And it's not that she wasn't proud about it, but that generation does not talk about that
Mhm.
service. My father served with the Tuskegee Airmen, rarely spoke about it.
Wow.
So when I finally got the story from her, I was just, my jaw dropped open because, of course, women were in the military and I'd learned about the wax and the waves, etc. But it just didn't occur to me that that there was this. And when she began to speak about the experience, how it was important to participate, this was a worldwide conflict. This was a big deal. You know, a lot of things were on the line in that war. They're coming back around, some of them,
Mm.
but a lot of things. And it was important to participate. And she did, and many young women did. And she thought it was the greatest adventure ever, which is typical of Dorothy. Yeah. What an adventure. Oh, I went through combat training at Fort Oglethorpe. Well, my husband was in the Army and he went through combat training, Vietnam era. He didn't think it was much of an adventure, but Dorothy did. She took the Queen Mary across the Atlantic to get to the UK. That was an adventure. I mean, that's the way she approached it. But the flip side of that is the seriousness of the work that they had to do. Their mission was to get that mail out there, because if you have no mail, you have low morale, because these people hadn't heard from home in months. And the Battle of the Bulge had kind of created a lot of chaos. And it was an amazing story. And I wanted to make sure that people knew about these women. Dorothy lived 100 years, but it still
Wow.
wasn't long enough.
Yeah.
It still was not long enough to see this book, of the other books that you mentioned, Sisters in Arms, etc., and to see a film like Tyler Perry's come to the screen. You know, she didn't live long enough to see that recognition. And I don't know how she would have felt about it, because she would have said, well, we did our part.
Mm.
She would probably downplay it. But
Mhm.
for people like me, it needs to be highlighted. This is important stuff. These women laid the foundation for all women in the military.
Absolutely. And in the book, one of the things, and historical fiction is great because for those of us who don't know about this, we learn something. And, one of the book clubs that I'm in, we read this book. And afterwards, all of us were doing research to find out more. And then we were sending each other clips. And it was so interesting. One of the things that you highlighted in the book that had a profound thought for me was how the women were treated versus some of the German prisoners of war were treated. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Um, yes, that really, it's an interesting scenario. That came to my attention when Dorothy was talking about her experience at Fort Riley. And she was born in Georgia, and she did not like the weather in Fort Riley, Kansas. She just did not like it at all. One of the things that she mentioned all the time was the mud, and then basically she called them prehistoric living conditions that the women were consigned to. And then she mentioned the central heating and the brick and lovely buildings that were used to house the prisoners of war from Germany. And I thought, wait, what? You know, the women basically had pot-bellied stoves to heat water, etc. And German POWs had nice, yeah. I mean, it just boggles the mind. I, it was very interesting. I mean, this was not uncommon, the unequal treatment of serving American military personnel who happened to be not white and German prisoners of war. Dorothy didn't make a big deal about it. All she had to do was just say that, give me the facts. And
Right.
the facts spoke for themselves. And one of the things that really struck her, of course, was the way some of those prisoners, at least in her Fort Riley experience, how they picked up on the ugly words. I'm using Dorothy's
Mm-hmm.
words, the
Yeah.
ugly words used to describe African American people. And she, you know, she noticed, of course, it was very obvious and it was very painful, especially when combined with the great living conditions they had versus
Mm.
the conditions that the women had. So, yeah, that was, that was always in my mind as I followed her story from the Americas overseas, to Birmingham, UK, and to Rouen in France.
That book is your book, I should say, No Better Time, is so incredible because it really delves into that and does it so well. It's so nuanced. And I love that you heard it from the horse's mouth. You're like,
Yes.
this isn't something. So, because some would say, was that fictionalized? And you're saying, absolutely, no, it wasn't. It was real. And so that makes perfect sense to me. What other things did you learn from as you were writing this book, or is there something that really struck you?
There were so many things, Sandra, but when it comes down to it, it's some of the basics. The fact that the military, at the time of World War II, after the Pearl Harbor, the United States had to mobilize just like that. And that meant everyone, including women. But the military didn't have they weren't ready for women. The uniforms didn't fit. They didn't know how to train them. They were at their wits' end. They needed their help, but they were like, okay, what do we do now? And Dorothy was about 5 feet tall and these tiny feet, and of course the boots didn't fit, and the uniform coats were. She complained about the coats. She knew how to
Yep.
sew, so she raised the hems, but nothing fit. You know. And then the other thing that she always said that there were a lot of complaints about was the food, because these women were used to, we
Seasoned.
yeah, girls can cook, so
I'm just gonna seasoned well.
yeah, so that was a little bit, I was kind of like, okay, can we get so and so to work to get KP duty so she maybe she'll cook up that chicken a little better than such and such, it was that kind of thing. And of course, all credit goes to Major Adams for being foresighted enough to say, these women will feel so much better if the hair is done the way they
Mm.
feel. It makes a difference. It's all part of that package. And you see it, so she installed a beauty parlor wherever the women, when they were based in the UK, they had their own beauty parlor. And it was so popular, women came from all over the place. But you can see it on their faces. If you see photographs of the 688 when they were on parade, when they're marching, every woman, her hat is on a certain way and her hair is done.
Oh,
Everybody's hair was done. It was important because that was
yes.
part of that starched, pulled together image. And when
And
those
that was
women
the era
marched,
for that too,
yes,
correct?
yes, they wanted everything. I mean, Dorothy said, they made sure everybody's nails were, just right and everyone had their faces. I mean, it was very important because they knew they were representing themselves, their parents, their culture, and their country. And they
Wow.
wanted to make sure they did it A plus plus. And I think they did.
That's awesome. Wow. All right. Now, what are you working on now? What's coming up? Ju- You, and you don't have to tell everybody. You just tell me. Nobody will hear.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah.
And the
Um,
rest and all the listeners. But we're just what's coming up.
well, I I have not revealed the title yet. That is to come. So if you're
Okay.
following me on Instagram, you will see that I often post, because I'm working on the book, draft one. I do 4 or 5 drafts of each book. So I'm on the second draft of the book. I call it book 8. It is, I'm kind of trying to go back to basic storytelling as it began when we were all people sitting around big campfires, maybe 5, 6,000 years ago.
Hmm.
I am exploring different genres with this one
All
and
right.
different time periods as well. Um, and that's all I can say about
All
it.
right. Okay. I'd love to tell. I tell people all the time I was raised by old people, and I had my Uncle George. He would always say, "Read between the lines." So I'm gonna tell y'all, read between the lines, and we'll follow her and to figure out what's going on. So you just keep, I'll keep you clued in. So
I
if I
thank
post something, y'all
I
just watch.
I'm working. It's moving along very well, knock on wood, and I I hope that readers at some point will find it as just plain good storytelling. Once upon a time, in some time, there was this, and we'll take you through quite a journey. That's my plan.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. So I have a couple of fun questions before we
Okay.
end. If you could donate 3 books to a library that you wanted, like your favorites, whether it's your favorites, most profound, what would they be? And why?
Okay, now are these books written by me or just books in general?
No, there can be anybody. What 3 books? And because I used to always say, what do you recommend? What books do people recommend? But everybody's got, so I'm like, no, I heard this asked somewhere and I tweaked it and I'm like, yeah, what 3 books would you want at a library?
Oh wow. Um, personal. I have a personal connection with. I know why the cage bird sings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for many reasons, including that I got to meet Dr. Angelou near the end of her life, and when I told her
Wow.
what I did, she looked at me. She had sunglasses on, I think vision issues, but she said, "You know what? Keep doing that. It's frustrating, I know, but keep doing that." I will always remember her words. That would be one. Handmaid's Tale would be another one for many reasons.
Okay.
And
Yes.
the Odyssey. And into the Odyssey, partially for research purposes, and I'll just leave it
Okay.
there. But the Odyssey is one of those historical stories that it's as if all of those who contributed to it, they just threw it all in that pot. And
Right.
it's a great, it's an adventure. There's mysticism, there's death, there's life, there's everything. There's just something about it that's grabbing me right now. And so I would say the Odyssey.
I love it. I love it. All right. And what's your favorite children's book?
Alice in Wonderland.
Oh.
For now. Now next week it might be different, but for now.
I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. I have to tell you, this has been such a delightful conversation. So where can viewers find you? How do they connect with you?
My website is SheilaJWilliams.com, and I'm on Instagram at Dancing on Edge 2, which is familiar.
It is very much
Um,
familiar.
and
Oh,
I am on Facebook, Sheila J. Williams author, I think is the handle. I don't, full disclosure, I'm not on Facebook very often. I check it,
okay.
but Instagram I use more often, and that is a great place to find me.
All right. Thank you. Wow. This has been an incredible conversation, everyone.
Thank you.
I see why I was sucked in. See why I'm telling you. Huge thanks to you so much, Sheila, for sharing your journey, your insights, all of it. And if you haven't read Sheila yet, what are you waiting for? Come on. I gotta tell you, you won't be disappointed at all.
Thank you.
So check the links below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below on what you thought. Love to hear from you, from your favorite takeaway from today. And until next time, keep reading, keep dreaming, and keep sharing your stories. See you next time.
Thank
Bye.
you.